In fact, one carpenter took matters into his own hands. Khalib Seabright was a carpenter, and he said, these people are going to freeze to death because they can't stay in a shelter where they'll catch COVID. So they're out on the street. With his bare hands, he built mini shelters for them. He put insulation, a smoke detector, a carbon monoxide detector, and he said plainly, this is no solution. It's just something I'm doing to save people's lives until we can finally find a way to house people in this, one of the wealthiest countries on planet Earth. And you know what the city said? They didn't say, we're going to give this guy a hand. Let's give him a round of applause and let's see how we can help him do even better. No, they didn't say, boy, this guy is taking action we should have taken long ago. He's making us look bad. We better perform better than we have before. No, they hired lawyers and they got an injunction against him. So all of a sudden, the one guy who's selflessly trying to help solve the problem caused by City Hall and by the bureaucracy is the villain.
Eric, right?
It's my Lord Wizard King, actually.
I'm the only one she codependent with.
Gets to do something fun and destructive that they would never usually be able to get to do, and everyone else gets made absolutely furious.
Absolutely furious. Absolutely furious.
And you get to laugh at them. Right, okay, I changed my mind. I get the joke now.
Like, he can play my music unless the PD say, okay, we're going to put Tech 9 in rotation. I'm going to have to pay for that, man. That's fucked up. Music is supposed to inspire. They're supposed to hear it coming out of the studio to open mic. Then from open mic, a DJ that spins at the local club hears it like, well, that's dope. He gets it from me. And he plays in the local club, and then the local club played a couple times. Everybody's singing it. Then the DJ from the radio station is in the crowd like, what is it? Whoa, what's this? And then he plays it. And then everybody requests it, and then he comes to Summer Jam and rocks it, then he puts out a CD, and then it's natural. Nah, not no more. And that's what, I'm old school, I'm 36 years old, so it's like, fuck you and your motherfucking radio game, your video game. If it ain't about, you know what I'm saying, how beautiful a motherfucker go, you know what I'm saying, I ain't trying to pay nobody $20,000 just to put my shit in rotation, man. I mean, it's just, it's fucked up. And when you, and my whole gist of the story is, why Killer is like, fuck this shit, man, because I give all of me, and not everybody's getting it like I want them to get it. So naturally, I have a chip on my shoulder, like, it's about motherfuckers that can pay for their billboard spot. It's about motherfuckers that can pay for, you know what I'm saying, MTV to come do this and do that. It's about motherfuckers that can pay BET to do this and do that. I mean, it'd be really, you know, when I say fuck the industry, a lot of my fans thought I was just saying fuck being on TV and fuck being on radio. No, I was talking about fuck the motherfuckers that run the TV and radio, that dictate what the fuck is hot. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. The industry, if you listen to my interviews, I say the people that are afraid to take chances with new shit. And you can take it back to all that shit and see what I'm talking about. The people who are driving, controlling the machine that dictates what comes out on radio and on television. You know what I'm saying? Fuck the industry, and I still feel that way.
Everyone's a star. It feels like we where we supposed to be, you know what I'm saying?
Nothing feels better than people saying your shit back to you, because that means they've internalized it.
You on the West Coast, it's like, not my land, not my territory. This is a different vibe. This is probably some of the most beautiful shit I could ever imagine, bro.
The mycelium sets up a guild of microorganisms that are conducive for its growth and competitive to pathogenic bacteria and other competitor fungi. Anyhow, garden giants by their nature are wanderers, and so you inoculate over there and they fruit over here. You know, these are just gorgeous right now. And moving this pot, look at the mycelial network. It's just such luxurious mycelium. And it's rhizomorphic mycelium, it's white. And these garden giants are being produced, and gorgeous. And this one in particular has a beautiful membranous annulus and has ridges on the gills. That's why it's called Rugoso annulata, Stropharia rugosa annulata, the garden giant. And we have some more garden giant volunteers coming up, and these will quadruple in the next 2 days. And where else will they be coming up? This is the way of garden giants, is they surprise you by, they look like little red bricks oftentimes. I've had several friends that say they thought they were red stones, and then they touched them, they were cold and had the feeling of a mushroom. So I love cultivating garden giants. It's the least amount of work and the most amount of fun for the long term. The advantage and disadvantage of the garden giant is it grows so rapidly. So here are some specimens that are past their prime. These are not really good to eat. But over here we have gorgeousness. These are amazing. And they're at the perfect stage to consume. And so we'll pop them out underneath. And that is ideal. When the veil is still closed, the burgundy color, this is when the mushrooms are the best flavored.
And it always amuses me that so many people seem to think that bullshit only comes from certain sources. You know, advertising, politicians, salesmen. Not true. Bullshit is everywhere. Bullshit is rampant. Parents are full of shit. Teachers are full of shit. Clergymen are full of shit. Law enforcement people are full of shit. The entire country is completely full of shit. In fact, this country was founded by a group of slave owners who told us that all men are created equal. That is what's known as being stunningly full of shit. And you know, I think people show their ignorance when they say they want politicians to be honest. What are these people talking about? If honesty were suddenly introduced into politics, it would throw everything off. The whole system would collapse. And I think deep down the American people know that. The American people like their bullshit out front, where they can get a good, strong whiff of it.
Because no matter how you voted, just like no matter where you come from, what language you speak, the color of your skin, the way you pray, I hear you. I hear you when you say that we can only move forward if no one is left behind. Our shared future is built vote by vote, door by door, and above all, person by person. That's something I learned when I first ran in Papineau 12 years ago. Durant les 12 dernières années, en tant que député de Papineau, j'ai eu la chance de rencontrer tellement de gens de différents horizons. C'est un honneur pour moi de vous représenter. C'est avec vous que j'ai commencé cette belle aventure. Alors, merci pour votre confiance. Je vais continuer d'être là pour vous, mes chers amis de Papineau. There are a lot of people who've worked hard, very hard, to get here tonight. First off, my fellow Liberals, my friends, congratulations. Whether you're a candidate, staff, or volunteer, I know there have been a lot of late nights and early mornings. There have been tough days, but together we've done something incredible. Bravo, mes amis.
Can I just begin? Just start speaking? I have to fill out a form or get permission from an agency or a department or some other authority? Aren't we in Canada here? Don't you need to fill out a form or get permission before you make anything, even if it's just making a speech? Well, you need permission for everything else, and you have to wait an awful long time to get it. According to newly released World Bank data, Canada ranks 36 out of 37 nations for the time it takes to get a building permit. You can't just go out and build something, create jobs, and support your local economy. You have to wait for the gatekeepers in order to get permission. Now, you don't have to ask the World Bank that. You could just drive 25 minutes from here and ask Tim Priddle. Runs a lumber mill near Manotick. Now, that lumber mill opened a big warehouse about 40 years ago, and guess how long it took to get approved? 1 week, one form, one stamped document from an engineer, one and done, and away you go. And you know what? That big, beautiful building is still standing safely to this day. But he wanted to build another warehouse, similar dimensions, doing similar things. This time, it took 6 years and $600,000 worth of consultants' fees, charges, and other obstructions. In fact, he had to hire an arborist to write a report on each little poplar tree that he cleared in what was actually just useless ditch brush that had never been used for anything before or otherwise, and had not been planned to be used for anything else. And yet 6 years, $600,000, 1,500 pages of paperwork it took for him to do that. Money he could have spent creating real jobs. But he experienced what so many experience in this country: life behind the gatekeepers. These are the people who are, I think, among the fastest growing industry in the country. They are the bureaucracies, the lobbyists, the consulting class, the politicians, the agencies who make their living by stopping other people and charging them excess tolls to do anything positive at all. In fact, this government personifies the gatekeeper economy. The very first decision it made on taking office was to veto the privately funded expansion of the Toronto Downtown Island Airport. An expansion which would have allowed Porter Airlines, a Canadian company, to buy $2 billion of Bombardier jets and land them there, creating jobs for another Canadian company, but also reducing traffic by landing business people in the business district rather than having to travel between Pearson and downtown, adding to pollution and delay and killing jobs. And in this case, who were the gatekeepers? Well, of course, the competitor airlines that didn't want to add convenience to this to the customers that would go to the downtown airport if this were approved, and of course the wealthy waterfront condo owners, almost all of them millionaires, and by virtue of their wealth having an excessive amount of political power. And so they killed all the opportunity for the people who would have worked on that project, and the customers who would have saved time, and the people who now have to sit on the roadways between a distant airport and a downtown destination. Not far from there are some more gatekeepers in a place called Cabbagetown. Now, this is a well-off community, leafy neighborhood with beautiful old Victorian brick houses, and along came an entrepreneur and he said, you know what would go well here on this street corner in this very large brick building? A daycare. It had enough space for 80 kids to go to that daycare. And he was prepared to put all of his own money in it, didn't need a cent from the government. Well, suddenly the uber progressive, wealthy elite Cabbagetowners who were against this construction rose up in protest. One man said, and I quote, "This is standard issue capitalism run amok." This man, it turned out, was a mining executive. Columnist Chris Selly actually called him a Marxist mining executive, hilariously. You can imagine this gentleman trying to get a mine approved if he thinks that a daycare is standard issue capitalism run amok. But I guess mines are in someone else's neighborhood. Another neighbor said, this is a slippery slope for this iconic neighborhood. What next, Madam Speaker? A playground? Children laughing? And the noise, one other person complained. One lady said that these kids will be walking within 2 meters of her house. And she signed her submission with PhD. Quiet, children. There's a genius at work in that house. Another signatory was a gentleman named Tiff Macklin. He happens to be the governor of the Bank of Canada, who's been lecturing Canadians on the need for taxpayer-funded daycares, the same kind of daycares that he made a submission to the City of Toronto to try and block. So, typical of the progressive left, they want government to block the provision of a service, and then they claim that the government needs to provide that service directly. But it's not just daycares and airports and lumber mills. It's more essential than that. It's the houses in which we live. A C.D. Howe report produced recently showed that government barriers add between $230,000 and $600,000 per single detached unit of housing in this country. So while the government brags that it's spending $70 billion tax dollars on housing, governments are blocking the very construction of that housing. I want you to think about how insane it is that we live in one of the least densely populated nations on planet Earth. In fact, there are only 4 Canadians for every square kilometer in this country. And yet, we have some of the most expensive real estate. There are more places in Canada where there's no one than there are places where there is anyone. And yet, Vancouver is the 2nd, and Toronto is the 6th most expensive housing market in the world when you compare median income to median housing price. More expensive than New York, more expensive than LA, more expensive than London, England, more expensive than tiny little island nation called Singapore. All of these places vastly more populated and even less expensive to live in. Well, why? Because while our central bankers print money to goose demand, our local governments block the construction and therefore constrain supply. Demand up, supply down, price rises, right? Pretty straightforward. So what are the consequences? Well, it's good for the rich. If you already own a mansion, well, you're getting wealthier every day because your house price is going up. You can sit back and have rocking chair money. Your house makes more money than you do. But if you're poor and you can't find a place to live, like the young people who just told a survey that we came out today, 1/3 of them say they've totally given up on ever owning a house in their life. Those people are out in the cold. Or in Toronto, where a social safety or a social services organization says 98% of homeless shelters space is occupied. Over 300,000 people in one city on a waiting list for subsidized housing. 10,000 people in that one city are homeless. You know, and a lot of people worried what would happen to the homeless in Toronto during this pandemic. In fact, one carpenter took matters into his own hands. Khalib Seabright was a carpenter, and he said these people are going to freeze to death because they can't stay in a shelter where they'll catch COVID. So they're out on the street. With his bare hands, he built mini shelters for them. He put insulation, a smoke detector, a carbon monoxide detector, and he said plainly, this is no solution. It's just something I'm doing to save people's lives until we can finally find a way to house people in this one of the wealthiest countries on planet Earth. And you know what the city said? They didn't say, we're going to give this guy a hand. Let's give him a round of applause and let's see how we can help him do even better. No, they didn't say, boy, this guy is taking action we should have taken long ago. He's making us look bad. We better perform better than we have before. No, they hired lawyers. And they got an injunction against him. So all of a sudden, the one guy who's selflessly trying to help solve the problem caused by City Hall and by the bureaucracy is the villain. How typically this is of the story we see in our country. Another poverty fighter, Dale Swampy, the head of the National Coalition of Chiefs, which has as its mandate to fight and defeat on-reserve poverty. That's their mission. So they came up with a plan. That was to support a brand new natural resource project that would ship Western Canadian energy to the coast where it could be delivered to the fast-growing and energy-hungry markets of Asia, thus breaking the American stranglehold on our energy exports, creating jobs for steel workers, for energy workers, for logistics and transportation workers, and delivering $2 billion of wages and benefits to Indigenous communities. The CEO of the project was going to be an Indigenous person, and 31 of the 40 Indigenous communities along the route supported it. That's more than 75%. And so the environmental agency responsible took a look, and they spent 3 years, heard from 1,500 witnesses, read 9,000 letters. They reviewed over 100,000 pages of evidence. They went to 21 different communities, and they concluded the pipeline was safe and in the public interest. But the Prime Minister took office, and he killed the project, denying those First Nations communities their constitutional right in the Charter to be consulted. He did not consult with any of them. And so, what happened? These Indigenous communities lost the $2 billion. Now we're being told there's going to be these green jobs the government is going to deliver, right? I asked Mr. Swampy, how many of these green jobs have shown up since the pipeline was killed? Zero. Nada, nothing. In fact, he said the so-called environmentalists did to him what they did to his father's generation 20 or 30 years ago. They came then and campaigned against hunting, trapping, and fishing. And once they were done with their politics and they'd won their political battle, they were gone. And they left behind impoverished communities with less opportunity than they had before. So that was the result. One of the gatekeepers that comes to mind is Gerald Butts. He made hundreds of thousands of dollars working for the World Wildlife Fund, which is a supposedly environmental organization, but instead of spending money on the environment, on preserving wetlands and so forth, they were paying him a multi-$100,000 severance for quitting his job and coming to work for the government, where he has helped to block pipelines ever since. You know, in this country, we live in a country where we can't even trade with ourselves. You know, maybe our friends in the bloc who want to create their own separate country, I don't know, maybe they like it that way, because we don't even treat our own interprovincial trade the way we treat foreign trade. You know, you can get arrested, you can get charged for bringing alcohol across an interprovincial border, even though I'm quoting from our Constitution, all articles of the growth, produce, and manufacture of any one province shall be admitted free into each of the other provinces. That was promised us back at the time of our Constitution, yet to this day, you can be charged for bringing liquor or maple syrup, or you can be charged for working in construction in the wrong province. Do you know, Madam Speaker, that according to Statistics Canada, the effect of these barriers on trade between Canadian provinces works out to a tariff of about 7%. According to the World Trade Organization, the tariff that Canada charges on foreign imports to Canada, 4%. In other words, we charge 7% on goods that travel between provinces and only 4% on goods that come from abroad. So if you order something from Alibaba delivered to your doorstep, it is likely tariffed at a significantly lower rate than if you went out and bought a product that was made in your neighboring province. That is economic hara-kiri, Madam Speaker, that we would punish our own businesses with higher tariffs than we would apply to Chinese businesses that sell within Canada. Raises the question, do you think we could even build the Canadian Pacific Railway today? I'm not sure we could. What about our national highway system? Do you think that could get built today? There'd be some gatekeeper wanting to block it. I mean, if we can't even transit goods across our borders without some parasitical interest group claiming there needs to be a tariff or regulation keeping it out, why would anybody allow a railway or a highway to be built? Forget transmission lines or pipelines. I'm not sure we can get anything done as long as this gatekeeper economy continues to stand in the way. We forget that there was a time when we got things done in this country. This is the country that discovered and isolated insulin, for God's sake, saving the lives of millions of diabetics. We discovered stem cells, which treats cancer and countless other conditions and has the promise to repair spinal cords and bring sight to the blind. We created a mechanical arm that can go into outer space and move hundreds of thousands of kilograms of weight with a remote control, the Canadarm. We conquered Vimy Ridge. We liberated the Dutch. We fought and succeeded at Juno Beach. Of course, that was at a time when if you said, oh, I've been triggered, it didn't mean that you heard a comment that hurt your feelings. It meant that you had been shot at by enemies on the battlefield. That was the generation of that time. At that time, we are a country that once had a government that would stand up and lead the world against apartheid. And now we have a government that's too terrified to speak out against the genocide of the Muslim minority in China. We have today a country where some people seriously talk about banning local kids' sports organizations from keeping score for fear of hurting the losing team's feelings. This is the country, Madam Speaker, of Paul Henderson, who scored the winning goal in the Summit Series with less than a minute left to electrify the world and send a signal in favor of freedom and against communism back in '72. Madam Chair, one day, I believe that we will knock down these gates and remove these gatekeepers altogether to make Canada a place where it's the easiest place on planet Earth in which to build a business, the fastest place to get sign-off to build something, the freest place on Earth in which to do commerce, to buy, to sell, to work, to build, to hire, to take risks, and yes, to even win. How about a budget bill like that? Thank you.
That's why we had a barrel like this down in our... When I was a kid, the disaster we worried about most was a nuclear war. That's why we had a barrel like this down in our basement, filled with cans of food and water. When the nuclear attack came, we were supposed to go downstairs, hunker down, and eat out of that barrel. Today, the greatest risk of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. Instead, it looks like this. If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. Not missiles, but microbes. Now, part of the reason for this is that we have invested a huge amount in nuclear deterrence, but we've actually invested very little in a system to stop an epidemic. We're not ready for the next epidemic. Let's look at Ebola. I'm sure all of you read about it in the newspaper. Lots of tough challenges. I followed it carefully through the case analysis tools we use to track polio eradication. And as you look at what went on, the problem wasn't that there was a system that didn't work well enough. The problem was that we didn't have a system at all. In fact, there are some pretty obvious key missing pieces. We didn't have a group of epidemiologists ready to go who would have gone, seen what the disease was, see how far it had spread. The case reports came in on paper. It was very delayed before they were put online, and they were extremely inaccurate. We didn't have a medical team ready to go. We didn't have a way of preparing people. Now, Médecins Sans Frontières did a great job orchestrating volunteers, but even so, we were far slower than we should have been getting the thousands of workers into these countries. And a large epidemic would require us to have hundreds of thousands of workers. There was no one there to look at treatment approaches, no one to look at the diagnostics, no one to figure out what tools should be used. As an example, we could have taken the blood of survivors, processed it, and put that plasma back in people to protect them. But that was never tried. So there was a lot that was missing, and these things are really a global failure. The WHO is funded to monitor epidemics, but not to do these things I talked about. Now in the movies, it's quite different. There's a group of handsome epidemiologists ready to go. They move in, they save the day, but that's just pure Hollywood. The failure to prepare could allow the next epidemic to be dramatically more devastating than Ebola. Let's look at the progression of Ebola over this year. About 10,000 people died, and nearly all were in the 3 West African countries. There's 3 reasons why it didn't spread more. The first is there was a lot of heroic work by the health workers. They found the people and they prevented more infections. The second is the nature of the virus. Ebola does not spread through the air. And by the time you're contagious, most people are so sick that they're bedridden. Third, it didn't get into many urban areas, and that was just luck. If it had gotten into a lot more urban areas, the case numbers would have been much larger. So next time, we might not be so lucky. You can have a virus where people feel well enough while they're infectious that they get on a plane or they go to a market. The source of the virus could be a natural epidemic like Ebola, or it could be bioterrorism. And so there are things that would literally make things 1,000 times worse. In fact, let's look at a model of a virus spread through the air like the Spanish flu back in 1918. So here's what would happen. It would spread throughout the world very, very quickly. And you can see there's over 30 million people die from that epidemic. So this is a serious problem. We should be concerned. But in fact, we can build a really good response system. We have the benefits of all the science and technology that we talk about here. We've got cell phones to get information from the public and get information out to them. We have satellite maps where we can see where people are and where they're moving. We have advances in biology that should dramatically change the turnaround time to look at a pathogen and be able to make drugs and vaccines that fit for that pathogen. So we can have tools, but those tools need to be put into an overall global health system, and we need preparedness. The best lessons, I think, on how to get prepared are, again, what we do for war. For soldiers, we have full-time waiting to go. We have reserves that can scale us up to large numbers. NATO has a mobile unit that can deploy very rapidly. NATO does a lot of war games to check, are people well trained? Do they understand about fuel and logistics and the same radio frequencies? So they are absolutely ready to go. So those are the kinds of things we need to deal with an epidemic. What are the key pieces? First is we need strong health systems in poor countries. That's where mothers can give birth safely, kids can get all their vaccines, but also where we'll see the outbreak very early on. We need a medical reserve corps. Lots of people who've got the training and background who are ready to go with the expertise. And then we need to pair those medical people with the military, taking advantage of the military's ability to move fast, do logistics, and secure areas. We need to do simulations, germ games, not war games, so that we see where the holes are. The last time a germ game was done in the United States was back in 2001, and it didn't go so well. So far, the score is germs 1, people 0. Finally, we need lots of advanced R&D in areas of vaccines and diagnostics. There are some big breakthroughs, like the adeno-associated virus, that could work very, very quickly. Now, I don't have an exact budget for what this would cost, but I'm quite sure it's very modest compared to the potential harm. The World Bank estimates that if we have a worldwide flu epidemic, global wealth will go down by over $3 trillion, and we'd have millions and millions of deaths. These investments offer significant benefits beyond just being ready for the epidemic. The primary health care, the R&D, those things would reduce global health equity and make the world more just as well as more safe. So I think this should absolutely be a priority. There's no need to panic. We don't have to hoard cans of spaghetti or go down into the basement. But we need to get going because time is not on our side. In fact, if there's one positive thing that can come out of the Ebola epidemic, it's that it can serve as an early warning, a wake-up call to get ready. If we start now, we can be ready for the next epidemic. Thank you.
Sir, Mr. Gates is here.
Bill Gates? I gotta go. Hey! Bill Gates actually showing up at...
Sir, Mr. Gates is here. Sir, Mr. Gates is here.
Bill Gates? I gotta go. Hey! Bill Gates actually showing up at corporate.
Hey, Steve, how you doing?
Not bad, just trying to get this next-gen press stuff handled.
I heard there's a little trouble in, Colorado somewhere?
Oh, it turns out it was nothing. Just some kids trying to turn the console wars into something bigger.
Oh, my gosh. When I stepped down and left you in charge of the company, Steve, I knew there might be some challenges for you.
Yeah, well, nothing I can't handle. There might be some changes we need to make to our marketing, but I'm optimistic.
Uh-huh.
I think we'll ultimately sell the number of units we want to.
You're right, Steve. Some changes do need to be made. Do you know what weakness is, Steve? Weakness is believing that competition is healthy. See, there was a time when Xboxes and PlayStations could both survive in this world, but that time's done. It's all headed to one device that people game on, watch TV on, socialize on. There's only going to be one winner. I can't have you idiots throwing away everything I worked so hard to achieve. Clean that shit up.
Tammy, the excitement over Black Friday is peaking, and none other than Bill Gates himself has shown up to try to make it even bigger.
That's right. We just want to do whatever we can to help our supporters get their Xboxes at incredible deals on Friday. So we've come to offer swords and battle axes, whatever the kids can carry to help them fight their way through the other shoppers.
We understand that you've donated some guns to the kids as well.
Yes, but we are limiting it to one per Xbox follower because, of course, the key thing here on everyone's mind is safety.
Mr. Gates, I was hoping I could talk to you about the fight on Friday.
Certainly. Eric, right?
It's my Lord Wizard King, actually. Having your leadership has certainly been a help, but I hope that we're clear that this is my army. There can only be one person of royalty. That's kind of the rules.
Oh, I certainly don't want to step on your toes. Don't worry, I'm quite good at letting my CEOs do what they want.
Your CEOs?
Let's face it, this is really just about you and me getting Xboxes. The rest are simply there to help us get through those doors.
What?
Ha! How's it feel? Now who's walking who through the betrayal garden?
Why don't you stay the f*** out of my business?
Why don't you stay the f*** out of my yard?